Jan Doyle. Welcome to Classroom Connections. This is an interesting show today. Originally, when I planned it, I was going to do one program, one 28-minute segment, say hello to and goodbye to my guests, and that was that. But what happened was we just got so involved in their story, and it's so fascinating that when my director told me time was up, I wanted to scream and shout, no, I have lots more I want to talk about. So that's how this part 2 came about. But I'm going to reintroduce our guests. Our guests are, I have 2 of them today, from the Institute of American Indian Studies. And my first guest is Dr. Lucianne Lavin. And she wrote the book about Venture Smith. I should get back to the front page. I was using it. The Venture Smith Homestead. And with her is the executive director, Laurie Lammarre. Welcome both back to the show.
Thank you.
It's been 5 minutes.
Thank you for having us again.
You're welcome. We left off with on the last one. Why don't you just recap for people who might have missed the first program? What is the Venture Smith Homestead?
It is an archaeological site that's located on Haddam Neck along the Connecticut River. That painting that you're showing there is an original painting done by Maggie Arnold based on the archaeology from the site, showing exactly how many structures were there. There were 8 or 9 structures. There were 3 houses. There was a boat pull-in because he did a lot in river trade and had a number of boats. There are a number of warehouses there where he stored a lot of the materials that he sold up and down the river. And there's a wharf also. And Venture Smith, his real name was Brotier Furrow. He was the firstborn son of an African prince. He would have been born into nobility and would have taken over his father's political power and estate, but unfortunately he was sold into slavery when he was 6 years old. He was enslaved for over 30 years in Rhode Island and Fisher's Island and North Stonington, Connecticut, not North Stonington, Stonington, Connecticut. He worked his way. After slave hours, his slave owner allowed him to work overtime, although, as I said in the first, in our first meeting, that he actually had to pay, for every dollar he made, he had to pay his slave owner 65 cents of that. So it took him a number of years to actually buy his freedom, and then he bought the freedom of his family, and through much hard work and perseverance and courage, he was able to eventually have a 130-acre farmstead on Haddam Neck, and also owned a number of boats and a fish house where he did fishing and river trading and farming, and was an extremely successful black man, free black.
And I think that's what I find so interesting about this, because I'm currently very involved with giving presentations about the Underground Railroad, and there aren't stories like that in what I'm working on and sharing with children. And then when I came across this information, as a former teacher, I knew nothing about this, which I think is very, very interesting. And I know I'm not the only teacher who doesn't know. And I also think the children don't know. And the children need to know about this magnificent man. This is a real American hero.
He's a wonderful role model, not only for black children, but for all children.
Yes.
The qualities that he shows, perseverance, honesty, courage. This is your Protestant ethic that made America great.
Yes.
Yet he's not Protestant and he's not white.
Yes, and he doesn't consider, and he considers Africa his homeland. Yes.
He does. He considers himself an African leader. You see that in his 1798 narrative, which he dictated to a white man. And it does tell you a lot about his time in Africa and other parts, but it does not tell you very much about his time in Haddam Neck.
No, and that's what I want to know more about.
Yes, and that was what the archaeology was able to tell us quite a bit about his life
So
there.
let's get to that part. Now, we talked last segment, we talked quite a bit about this piece.
The kettle.
The kettle. And so I'm just going to mention that I'm not allowed to touch it, I'm just saying. And you have to use gloves, and that's also with the artifacts you have here. But why don't we go first to the slides that we brought in, we culled them down, because that will give us the next piece that we're missing, and you can tell us about the what's on the slide. So Mike, the first slide, why don't you tell us what this is?
Oh, yes. Well, on the left is the key to a clock. It's a clock key, showing us, obviously, that he was able to buy clocks, which is not very many free blacks could afford clocks. We'll see that there was a number of other materials. He talks in his narrative about how frugal he is all the time, he tells us, and it's true. You don't find any frivolous artifacts on this site. We actually found over 49,000 artifacts and over 900 faunal remains, dietary remains, from his homestead.
What is that on the right side?
On the right is a mouth harp.
And what
That
a
is
mouth
actually
harp?
placed in the mouth, and it's a musical instrument.
Oh, okay.
And we actually found, I think we found 3 of them in the area of his homestead.
Have you ever heard that played, a real mouth harp? What does that say? Does it sound like
It's like a twang.
a twang?
Yeah, it's a twanging ding 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 ding.
It's I don't know. Maybe Dr. Lucy can. And it's something that's pretty often found on Revolutionary War campsites. So how soldiers.
It was a major,
It's very
it was a
small,
major
so-
musical instrument used during the early 1800s.
17th century too. Yeah.
Oh, that is interesting. That
It's
is
fun to
very-
find them because it's something that you think about in daily life. We always think about kitchen materials, but you don't think about playing,
No, you don't.
right? So it's a
Oh, I
little
don't.
bit of that, like finding dice
Yes.
or finding this jaw harp or mouth harp.
And that is about the only, one of the few non-necessary articles we found on his site.
How did this round part would go into the mouth?
No, I think it's the base part that goes into the mouth. There's another little wire that is, you don't see it on this mouth harp because it's missing, but there's another little wire that's there that's actually played.
Oh, I see. Okay. And we'll go to the next slide. Okay, what is this?
That is a view of our excavations. In the background, that's the Salmon River. And you can see that
How is that in relationship to the Connecticut River? Or
the salmon flows into the Connecticut.
okay, good. Thank you.
The Connecticut River is actually to the east
Okay.
of our site. And this photograph was taken from an old colonial road that runs all the way through Haddam Neck and goes right through his homestead, which was good for him. And that big flat square stone in the front is the stoop of his second story, where he had his office. And you can see on the bottom there's another big flat stone, and that is the front stoop of his first story.
Now those are very large. That is a very large stoop.
Yeah, they are.
So is that indicative to the size of his house?
His house was fairly big. In one of the later additions to his narrative, there's an introduction or a preface written by Henry Selden who calls it a little house, and this is where archaeology actually corrects. Archaeology can supplement historical documentation, but it also can correct it. That house was not little. It was 2 stories, and it was 20 feet wide and at least 40 feet long, maybe even longer, because we never did a final excavation on these sites. We only went to what's called phase 2. So it was a fairly
Can I ask why you
large
never-
center chimney house.
Why you never went to this next phase?
Well, because Connecticut Yankee had told Dr. David Poirier who was the archaeologist at the State Historic Preservation Office that oversaw this, that they would preserve the property. And so Poirier told us to only go to phase 2.
Okay. I want phase 3, I'm just saying.
Well,
Phase 3 would be great.
It'll be there someday.
It's good to always leave part of a site, because we're always, there's always inventing more and more techniques where we can learn things now. For example, you know, you can actually now, you can get rocks that were put in an open fireplace, and you can send them to a chemist, and now through chemical absorption techniques, they can tell you what food remains were absorbed into that rock now. 20 years ago, you couldn't do that.
There's also now LiDAR.
So there's so many new techniques being invented every year, so it's always good to save part of a site.
What, LiDAR?
LiDAR is really fun. We probably don't have enough time to get into it now, but it's essentially kind of a very extra special version of aerial photography. We'll call it that right now.
It can see through forests, so it can show you what's on the soil surface, even in heavy forests.
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, the site is, you know, preserved
So
for
that,
the future.
that's, you know, that makes sense to me now, because it didn't make sense a few minutes ago. Thank you so much. All right, the next slide.
Let's see, this is one of the cellar halls for one of the 3 houses. There were 2 smaller houses that were sitting up on the hillside right here. Can I hold that up here?
That's not on camera, though. Okay, now it is. Go ahead.
Can it?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the center chimney house that we just looked at in the last slide. And this house and this house are where probably he had his son's family up there. Basically as guardhouses to oversee. It was another strategy for making sure that nobody stole from him. And this is the one that actually in the center of the cellar hall, they buried this cast iron kettle. And as we said in the first program, that has spirituality. Metal has power for a number of non-Western cultures, including West African cultures. And also, kettles have been found in slave quarters and in black houses, either below the floorboards, purposely put there, sometimes with other parts of the Minkisi ritual. The Minkisi are charms, or under openings in the house, the front door, the windows, because this is where spirits come in and out. So it definitely has a spiritual quality to it as well as an economic quality.
Very easy. That's very interesting to me. All right, it's Mike, if we could have the next slide, please. Thank you.
Oh, this is where my archaeological crew is clearing off the boat pull-in, which was a huge, something like 20 feet wide and 49 to 60 feet long, a huge boat pull-in.
Okay, I'm just going to say that.
Suggests he had big boats.
A boat
pull-in.
Yes.
They would pull the boat in from the Salmon River to make repairs on it.
So he was extremely industrious and extremely varied in how he made money.
Oh yes, and he made cash income, and this is how he could put it back into his farm, back into his boats, and into his fishing gear, and he also traded his land. He actually would sell some of his land to men he knew, who would give him cash for it, so he could use that capital to buy another boat or buy material that he wanted to sell. And then when he made money from that, he would buy that land back from these men. Amos White and Mr. Green, both of these guys were well known in East Haddam. He partnered with men all the time, and they were literally his bankers.
Interesting.
He was a very intelligent man, especially as far as making money. He was a shrewd businessman.
That's how we like our men. All right, next slide, please.
Oh, and this is the excavations going down. There was a building set up right by the Salmon River. And in fact, one year we had a lot of spring flooding, and it actually flooded this place. We could not get to it that year. I couldn't figure out why they would put a building down there until we actually started to excavate it, and we found the forge and lots of metal blanks. It was a blacksmith shop. And he used it not only for regular farm activities, because we found horseshoes and ox shoes, but also for repairing boats, for making a number of the tools. And we have them here. We're going to show.
Was that a wise decision to have it so near the river? Even
yes, because you had a forge and an open fire there, that a lot of times these places would catch fire. So he purposely put it right by the river so they'd be able to put the fire out right away. Because otherwise, he had he had his homestead set up like an African compound. The buildings were not spread out all over the place, because if they were, people would more easily be able to steal from them because they'd be far apart. But if you have all of them close together so you can watch them, but when they're close together like that, if one catches fire, they can all catch fire.
Oh, that's very
So
interesting.
that was why he set it down there by the Salmon River.
Okay. Mike, next slide, please.
This is a limestone.
Now, what is a limestone?
It is the base stone, and you can see there's an incision in it, and it leads off. And you put a barrel over it, and you fill the barrel with ashes, and wood ashes, and you pour water in it, and this is how you make lye, and lye is how you make soap.
That's amazing. You found that stone.
Oh yeah, it was sitting right over there. It is a major, probably every farm had one of these, because everybody made their own soap.
Yes, yes. We don't do that today.
No, thank God.
All right. The next one.
Oh, and this is the remnants of Venture's Wharf. This is low tide, the Salmon River is tidal, and this is low tide, and you can actually see the wood cribbing, remnants of the wood cribbing and the stone that formed this wharf. And again, it's shown on, can they see this? Can I?
You know what? I'm going to ask Mike to bring up the picture of the cover. It should be the first one slide that's in your set of slides, if that's possible, Mike. Because that way we could spend a little time on. It's the first one when we copy them over. It's if you go to, it has blue, a lot of blue on the picture. I enhanced
a lot of houses.
A lot of houses. He's looking for it. He's having difficulty finding it. It's probably not zipped. It's an unzipped one. But okay, he'll find it.
Okay.
So what did you want to say about this?
Oh, I just wanted to say that this painting actually shows the wharf as it would have looked in Venture's time, with the boats around it and all the a lot of the barrels that they shipped. They would ship things in barrels, and in fact, in the until 1796, there was no store on Haddam Neck. They would actually sell their goods right off the wharfs, and that's probably what he did.
Now, who drew this picture? How did that come about?
This is done by an artist, Maggie Arnold. She is the wife of John Arnold, who is one of the officials at Connecticut Yankee, who was one of our liaisons.
Oh, that's
And in fact, his daughter is the designer for this booklet.
Wow, we have it up here now.
Sue Arnold.
Wow.
Yeah, there it is.
So we were just talking about the wharf, and that's what in the previous slide we saw the remnants of. And you're right, it is all clustered together.
It is. Maggie Arnold is the artist who made this lovely painting, and it's based on our archaeological findings. We did find over on the up on the left, the left corner up there, that brown building is a farm. We found the remnants of that, the foundations, And below that, another big building on the left there is a huge warehouse.
And I see the blacksmith shop too.
Yes, the blacksmith shop, and you can see how the wharf, we think the wharf was reconstructed, where they would actually not only put all those, they would store a lot of the goods in barrels. Even food stuff was stored in barrels, and they would load them onto boats, and he would trade it up and down the river and along the coast. He was very well known in Long Island.
Well, this is a nice depiction of that. Mike, I appreciate you finding that slide. If you can bring us back to the original set that we pulled up and we're going to look at, we'll go back into sequence, please. So that, how long did it take you to write this book?
Oh, maybe about 6 months.
And how long, and you excavated for?
Oh, the excavations. We started doing the archival work in 2001, and we wrote, we had to write a report for this. We have 3 volumes, this thick, each volume. That was the technical report on this. And that came out in 2008. So not just this site, though. There were actually, I think there were something like 30 sites on the property.
Wow, wow.
Native American and historic.
While Mike is looking for the next slide, why don't we talk a little bit, this one, this piece right here.
Ah, yes. Let me pick that up.
I won't touch it, I'm just saying.
No, I'll pick it up. This is a percussion cap pistol.
If you look into the monitor, you'll see how it's showing. Maybe you can turn it on the end, on its side.
See, how would I do that?
That's good.
This way?
Yeah, that looks good.
Yep. It has the name Ketlin on it. Ketlin was a company in England, and they made this particular type of pistol from probably about 1812 to 1825. So this did not belong to Venture, because Venture dies in 1805. But his son Solomon and his family continue to live on the property until Solomon dies in 1843. So most likely this belonged to Solomon. Again, this is another strategy for keeping people from stealing from them. This would actually fit, it's only 5 inches long, and this would actually fit in somebody's vest pocket.
Now, would a woman carry this? Because this seems like a...
It could also be carried by a woman as well as a man.
Okay, the next slide is coming up, and we're going to... Now, this is interesting. This reminds me of what you said in the other program about how something is cleaned up. Yeah. Why don't you describe that for us?
Sure. I believe, Dr. Lucy, that is a padlock, correct?
It is.
It's a lock. So this is actually what an iron artifact, looks like when it comes out of the ground. So this is a ferrous, it's iron artifact, and after it comes back from the field into the lab, a conservator would treat this, and they would treat it in a number of ways. The first is to x-ray it to make sure they are aware of all of those little intricacies of the object, and then they would use different tools, maybe air abrasion to take all of those little rust pieces off, and then they would actually cover it in some type of maybe wax material to preserve it for the future.
Oh, thank you so much.
So it eventually looks nice and pretty, like what
Is that
Dr.
the same one?
This is the same.
That's the same one that was in the picture?
Yep, this is the same one.
Push it, move over that side, the other way.
That way?
Towards,
that one yep. How about?
Wow.
And this is the conserved version. This is an 18th century padlock, very large, and it was found right near one of the storehouses. So Venture obviously used these padlocks to padlock all of his storehouses. And he had at least 3, maybe even 5.
Wow.
So that's what that is.
Well, that's fascinating. I know you have some, we don't have much time left. I know that sounds impossible.
Yeah, why don't I quickly go through
Sure.
these. These are evidence, these nails are evidence of his boat repair and boat making. These are clinker nails. They're specific special nails that are made, are used on small boats. They were actually identified by people from Mystic Seaport who came up to check it out. Also another evidence of his boat making, and there's only one sentence in his narrative that talks about his boat making. And this is a handmade caulking iron. And basically what it was used for is it would caulk boats with oakum. Oakum was hemp or jute fibers that were mixed with pine tar. And they would lather this on the boat and make it
They would seal the cracks.
waterproof. And we found a lot of tools. There were a lot of tools. This is a wedge, of course, but we found scythe blades and screwdrivers and all kinds of regular household tools and farming tools.
Are these things on display at the museum, at the Institute?
That's a great question. Right now they are not. So these actually came from our collections vault at the museum. And it's interesting that we haven't really touched on that, although we are the Institute for American Indian Studies, and we do explore a lot of Native American culture as well as contemporary issues and history as well. That, Venture himself, I don't believe, was Native American, but that the African and Native American populations within the Northeast did share kind of a similar story. And that is, of course, that, it may have been a repressed culture. It's challenging.
Well, some of his descendants did marry Native Americans, and there is some belief that his wife may have been part Native American, even though she was a slave, because Indians were slaves as well.
I hate to say this, we're really out of time. I
didn't get to the crystals
I know. We didn't do all the slides. We're really out of time. But I want to thank you so much for coming. I've enjoyed it immensely. I think that this is fascinating, and I hope someday it gets displayed for everybody else to see.
We did have a temporary exhibit a number of years ago when we first got it. We have all of the artifacts at the Institute. And I've also, the East Haddam Historical Society were very interested in putting up an exhibit. This was before Laurie's time.
We only have less than a minute left, so I'm going to ask you to give the Institute's website so people can contact you.
So the Institute for American Indian Studies is located in Washington, Connecticut, northwest corner. And you can visit us online at iaismuseum.org. And we are open 7 days a week.
And you have some wonderful programs. You have some wonderful events that you can go on the website and find out about it. I want to thank you so much for your generosity in sending me this book to me so I could underline.
You are most welcome.
And I really appreciate it, and I thank you so much for coming down. I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or you'd like to contact me, you can go to my website, classroomconnections365.com, or you can email me at jmdteach@comcast.net. Till next time, thank you.